8, Bolgia 10. The Falsifiers, Class 1, Alchemists. Dante lingers on the edge of the ninth Bolgia, expecting to see one of his kinsmen, Gary del Bello, among the sowers of discord. Virgil, however, hurries him on. Since time is short, and as they cross the bridge over the 10th Bolgia, Virgil explains that he had a glimpse of Gary among the crowd near the bridge, and that he had been making threatening gestures at Dante. The poets now look into the last Bolgia of the 8th circle and see the falsifiers. They are punished by afflictions of every sense, by darkness, stench, thirst, filth, loathsome diseases, and a shrieking din. Some of them, moreover, run ravening through the pit, tearing others to pieces. Just as in life they corrupted society by their falsifications, so in death these sinners are subjected to a sum of corruptions. In one sense they figure forth what society would be if all falsifiers succeeded, a place where the senses are in affliction, since falsification deceives the senses, rather than a guide, where even the body has no honesty, and where some lie prostrate while others run ravening to prey upon them. Not all of these details are made clear until the next canto, for Dante distinguishes 4 classes of falsifiers, and in the present canto we meet only the first class, the alchemists, the falsifiers of things. Of this class are Grifolino, d'Arezzo, and Capocchio, with both of whom Dante speaks. The sight of that parade of broken dead had left my eyes so sotted with their tears I longed to stay and weep, but Virgil said, "What are you waiting for? Why do you stare, as if you could not tear your eyes away from the mutilated shadows passing there? You did not act so in the other pits. Consider, if you mean perhaps to count them, this valley and its train of dismal spirits winds 22 miles round. The moon already is under our feet. The time we have is short, and there is much that you have yet to see." "Had you known what I was seeking," I replied, "you might perhaps have given me permission to stay on longer." As I spoke, my guide had started off already, and I, in turn, had moved along behind him. Thus I answered as we moved along the cliff. "Within that cavern upon whose brim I stood so long to stare, I think a spirit of my own blood mourns the guilt that sinners find so costly there." And the master then, "Hereafter let your mind turn its attention to more worthy matters, and leave him to his fate among the blind. For by the bridge and among that shapeless crew I saw him point to you with threatening gestures, and I heard him called Gary del Bello. You were occupied at the time with that headless one, who in his life was master of Altaforte, and did not look that way, so he moved on." "Oh, my sweet guide," I answered, "his death came by violence, and is not yet avenged by those who share his blood, and thus his shame. For this he surely hates his kin, and therefore, as I suppose, he would not speak to me, and in that he makes me pity him the more." We spoke of this until we reached the edge from which, had there been light, we could have seen the floor of the next pit. Out from that ledge the Malebolgia's final cloister lay outspread, and all of its lay brethren might have been in sight but for the murk. And from those dead such shrieks and strangled agonies shrilled through me like shafts, but barbed with pity, that my hands flew to my ears. If all the misery that crams the hospitals of pestilence in Maremma, Valdichiano, and Sardinia in the summer months, when death sits like a presence on the marsh air, were dumped into one trench, that might suggest their pain, and through the screams putrid flesh spread up its sickening stench. Still bearing left, we passed from the long sill to the last bridge of Malebolgia. There the reeking bottom was more visible. There High Justice, sacred mistress of the First Father, reigns eternally over the falsifiers in their distress. I doubt it could have been such pain to bear the sight of the Aginian people dying, that time where such malignance rode the air that every beast down to the smallest worm shriveled and died. It was after that great plague that the ancient people, as the poets affirm, were reborn from the ants. As it was to see the spirits lying heaped on one another in the dank bottom of that fetid valley. One lay gasping on another's shoulders, one on another's belly, and some were crawling on hands and knees among the broken boulders. Silent, slow, step by step, we moved ahead, looking at and listening to those souls too weak to raise themselves from their stone bed. I saw two there like two pans that are put one against the other to hold their warmth. They were covered with great scabs from head to foot. No stable boy in a hurry to go home, or for whom his master waits impatiently, ever scrubbed harder with his curry-comb than those two spirits of the stinking ditch scrubbed at themselves with their own bloody claws to ease the furious burning of the itch. And as they scrubbed and clawed themselves, their nails drew down the scabs the way a knife scrapes bream or some other fish with even larger scales. "Oh, you," my guide called out to one, "you there, who rip your scabby mail as if your fingers were claws and pincers, tell us if this lair counts any Italians among those who lurk in its dark depths, so may your busy nails eternally suffice you for your work." "We both are Italian, whose unending loss you see before you," he replied in tears. "But who are you who come to question us?" "I am a shade," my guide and master said, "who leads this living man from pit to pit to show him hell, as I have been commanded." The sinners broke apart as he replied, and turned convulsively to look at me, as others did who overheard my guide. My master then, ever concerned for me, turned and said, "Ask them whatever you wish." And I said to those two wraiths of misery, "So may the memory of your names and actions not die forever from the minds of men in that first world, but live for many sons. Tell me who you are, and of what city. Do not be shamed by your nauseous punishment into concealing your identity." "I was a man of Arezzo," one replied, "and Albert of Siena had me burned. But I am not here for the deed for which I died. It is true that jokingly I said to him once, 'I know how to raise myself and fly through the air,' and he, with all the eagerness of a dunce, wanted to learn, because I could not make a Daedalus of him, for no other reason. He had his father burn me at the stake. But Minos the infallible had me hurled here to the final Bolgia of the 10 for the alchemy I practiced in the world." And I to the poet, "Was there ever a race more vain than the Sienese? Even the French compared to them seem full of modest grace." And the other leper answered mockingly, "Except Strica, who by careful planning managed to live and spend so moderately, and Nicolo, who in his time above was first of all the shoots in that rank garden to discover the costly uses of the clove, and excepting the brilliant company of talents in which Caccia squandered his vineyards and his woods, and Abbagliato displayed his intelligence. But if you wish to know who joins your cry against the Sienese, study my face with care, and let it make its own reply. So you will see I am the suffering shadow of Capocchio, who by practicing alchemy falsified the metals, and you must know, unless my mortal recollection strays, how good an ape I was of nature's ways." Notes. 10. 22 miles. Another instance of poetic rather than literal detail. Dante's measurements cannot be made to fit together on any scale map. 10 to 11. The moon is under our feet. If the moon, nearly at full, is under their feet, the sun must be overhead. It is therefore approximately noon of Holy Saturday. 18. Cavern. Dante's use of this word is not literally accurate, but its intent and its poetic force are obvious. Jerry del Bello, a cousin of Dante's father, he became embroiled in a quarrel with the Sacchetti of Florence and was murdered. At the time of the writing, he had not been avenged by his kinsmen, in accord with the clan code of a life for a life. Altafarte, Bertrand de Born was lord of Hautefort. 40 to 41. Cloister, lay brethren. A Dantean irony. This is the first suggestion of a sardonic mood reminiscent of the gargoyle cantos that will grow and swell in this canto until even Virgil resorts to mocking irony. 47. Maremma, Valdicciano, and Sardinia. Malarial plague areas. Valdicciano and Maremma were swamp areas of eastern and western Tuscany. 59. The Aeginean people dying. Juno, incensed that the nymph Aegina let Jove possess her, set a plague upon the island that bore her name. Every animal and every human died, until only Aeacus, the son born to Aegina of Jove, was left. He prayed to his father for aid, and Jove repopulated the island by transforming the ants at his son's feet into men. The Aegineans have since been called Myrmidons, from the Greek word for ant. 76. In a hurry to go home. The literal text would be confusing here. I have translated one possible interpretation of it, as offered by Giuseppe Vandelli. The original line is, Ne da colui che mal volentier vegia, nor by one who unwillingly stays awake, or, less literally but with better force, nor by one who fights off sleep. 85. My guide called out to one. The sinner spoken to is Grifolino d'Arezzo, an alchemist who extracted large sums of money from Alberto da Siena, on the promise of teaching him to fly like Daedalus. When the Sienese finally discovered he had been tricked, he had his uncle, the Bishop of Siena, burn Grifolino as a sorcerer. Grifolino, however, is not punished for sorcery, but for falsification of silver and gold through alchemy. 125 to 132, Strica, Nicolo, Caccia, Abaliato. All of these Sienese noblemen were members of the Spendthrift Brigade and wasted their substance in competitions of riotous living. Leno, Canto 13, was also of this company. Niccolo del Salimbene discovered some recipe, details unknown, prepared with fabulously expensive spices. Accepting is ironical. 137. Carpaccio, reputedly a Florentine friend of Dante's student days, were practicing alchemy. He was burned at the stake at Siena in 1293.